you are watching Shalom World News. I am Marina Grosu from Washington, D.C. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. A bank employee in Louisville, Kentucky opened fire, killing 5 people, and live-streamed the event on Instagram. The victims' ages ranged from 40 to 64. The shooting occurred at the Old National Bank in the heart of the city at about 8:30 a.m. local time. Police arrived within 3 minutes and fatally shot the attacker in an exchange of gunfire. Connor Sturgeon, 25, was identified as the suspect. Sturgeon had been working as a portfolio banker for around 2 years. He had no prior interactions with law enforcement, according to officials. He allegedly wrote a statement outlining his plans for the mass shooting before reporting to work on Monday after receiving word from the bank that he would be fired. Archbishop Shelton Faber of Louisville prayed for those affected and lamented the senseless violence. In Benue region in north-central Nigeria, at least 94 people are said to have been killed in a string of fatal attacks on Christian communities throughout Holy Week. This is a troubling sign of rising violence attributed to Muslim militias in the country's middle belt. Muslim gunmen killed dozens of people on the night of Good Friday during a raid on an elementary school in the town of Gunman, which housed roughly 100 displaced Christian farmers and their families. There are an estimated 2 million displaced people in Benue state who are unable to dwell on their ancestral farmlands because they fear for their lives. Some farmers return to their farms during the day to work on them. Then they seek refuge in displaced person camps at night. Meanwhile, Archbishop Benjamin Kwashi of Jos in northern Nigeria said there is a need for Christians around the world to stand in solidarity with the persecuted believers in Nigeria. Pope Francis remembered the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic in his Regina Coeli address on Monday. He prayed that the agreement, which put an end to decades of violence, would continue to inspire peace. The Good Friday Agreement of Belfast, signed on April 10, 1998, put an end to Northern Ireland's decades-long violence that killed more than 3,500 people and eased sectarian tensions between Catholics and Protestants. Meanwhile, the Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of all Ireland, the Most Reverend Eamon Martin, welcomed Pope Francis' Good Friday Agreement anniversary prayers. He said he was pleased that the Holy Father included a prayer for lasting peace and harmony in Ireland during the Regina Coeli. A report from the Institute for the Study of War has analyzed the religious repression by Russia in occupied parts of Ukraine since the war began on February 24, 2022. In its report, it accuses Moscow of making religion a weapon to discredit Ukraine in the international arena. Russian authorities are also resorting to information operations about religion to advance military objectives, despite itself committing gross violations of religious freedom in occupied Ukraine. The Institute warned that there are chances of Russia using the Orthodox Easter holiday on April 16th to demand a temporary cessation of hostilities in order to delay Ukrainian counteroffensive. The Institute also added that Moscow troops have never shown any regard for religion or religious institutions in the regions they are occupying. The report says that 26 places of worship have been either closed or forcefully handed over to the Russian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate. 2 well-known Chinese human rights lawyers, including one who demanded that Chinese President Xi Jinping step down, have been given a jail sentence of more than 10 years. Su Zhiyong and fellow activist Deng Zhaoxi were found guilty of subversion of state power following trials behind closed doors. Both are prominent members of the New Citizens Movement, a civil rights organization that pushes for constitutional change and denounces public corruption. During a hearing in Shandong province in East China, Su was sentenced to 14 years in prison for seeking the resignation of President Xi over his handling of the COVID-19 outbreak, while Deng was sentenced to 12 years and deprived of political rights for 3 years. Human Rights Watch said that civil liberties and freedom of expression have receded even further during Xi's decade-long tenure. The Israeli government has alerted the military following rocket attacks from Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, and Syria. The attacks were reportedly perpetrated by Iran and occurred during the Passover holiday. At least 30 rockets were fired into northern Israel from southern Lebanon, while more than 6 were launched from Syria. Israel was subjected to rocket attacks on both its northern and southern areas during the beginning of the Passover holiday. Meanwhile, Israel launched missiles against targets in the Gaza Strip, Lebanon, and Syria to retaliate against the attacks. The rocket firing broke out days after surging violence on various fronts due to unrest in Jerusalem and an Israeli police raid on the city's most sensitive religious site, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. An Uruguayan archbishop has warned the faithful over the surging anti-church propaganda across the world. During his Easter Mass homily, Archbishop of Montevideo, Cardinal Daniel Sturla, addressed the issue and expressed his concern. Urging the faithful to be witnesses of Christ and share the Easter message, the prelate alerted them that anti-church propaganda is everywhere. Speaking about the same, Cardinal Sturla said that the indoctrination is not only present in Uruguay or Montevideo, but rather in the whole world where the church works. The prelate then reiterated the significance of Easter, where Christ dispels all the darkness of the heart and spirit. The Egyptian foreign minister demanded an end to all types of terrorism to restore calm in Syria. Sameh Shoukry reiterated Egypt's full support for efforts to find a comprehensive political settlement in Syria in accordance with Security Council resolutions during a phone chat with the UN Special Envoy to Syria, Geir Pedersen. The two men also talked about how to lessen the suffering of Syrians. A second rocket barrage from Syria was fired toward the Golan Heights on Sunday, prompting the Israeli military to begin airstrikes on the country. Israel's national radio reported that 3 missiles were fired from Syrian territory in the direction of Israel. The U.S. state of Iowa's Attorney General's office has halted covering emergency contraception and, in rare instances, covering abortions for sexual assault victims. According to a spokesman, the payments have been suspended as part of an investigation into victim services. According to federal and state law, Iowa is required to cover many of the costs that assault victims incur when they seek medical attention, including the price of forensic testing. The morning after pill, Plan B, and contraceptive methods were paid for by the state's Victim Compensation Fund under the former Attorney General. Despite the potential advantages of artificial intelligence, some people are worried about the dangers related to its growth. Recently, a bot with artificial intelligence was given the mission of eradicating humans, and its dedication to the task was more than a little disconcerting. The bot, Chaos GPT, is an altered version of OpenAI's AutoGPT, an open-source program showcasing the GPT-4 language model's capabilities. According to a YouTube video of the procedure, Chaos GPT was given the 5 objectives of exterminating humanity, creating world dominance, causing chaos and ruin, manipulating humanity, and becoming eternal. The user requested that Chaos GPT operate in continuous mode, which could cause it to run indefinitely or perform things you would not typically authorize. The organization Save the Children has looked into child labor and says that more than 336,000 children in Italy between the ages of 7 and 15 have worked continuously, irregularly, or occasionally. This represents 6.8% of the population at that age, or approximately 1 child for every 15 children. Moreover, nearly 28% of 14 to 15-year-old children in Italy who report engaging in or having engaged in employment activities have done so in ways that are particularly detrimental to their academic and physical well-being. According to the organization's survey, catering, retail sales in stores and enterprises, and employment in the countryside are the primary industries in which children work. A recently published report reveals that there are more old parents in Denmark than young ones. The report stated that the average age of people having their first child in the Scandinavian country is above age 45. In the 1970s, the average age was 24. The current shift is partly because more women are postponing the birth of their first child. The current trend is also due to the easier availability of contraception and abortion. Bearing the first child later in life has its challenges, including a higher chance of miscarriage or disability. For 2 weeks in a row, the Bible-based movie His Only Son is at the top tier at the weekend box office. It landed an A Cinema Score audience rating, as well as 80% on Rotten Tomatoes during the Easter weekend, bringing in over $11 million in sales. It was made on a budget of $250,000. Angel Studios is the streaming platform behind The Chosen, the most successful crowdfunded faith movie venture. His Only Son was released in theaters on March 31st. The movie narrates the episode where Abraham is told by God to sacrifice his firstborn son, Isaac. The movie is all about the account of Abraham, his son, and the two servants as they travel to Mount Moriah for the sacrifice. The movie revolves around the centuries-old question as to why the Lord demanded such a sacrifice. It also urges viewers to ask themselves whether they will have the faith if they are asked to give up everything. According to CBN News, the movie was the first flick to resort to crowdfunding to raise marketing funds to pay for distribution and advertising costs. And those are your latest headlines. Join us again tomorrow for more. You can also visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.